The Australian Defence Force is closely monitoring a fleet of Chinese warships which were spotted sailing just 276 kilometres away from Sydney. The vessels were first detected in international waters off the Queensland coast last week and have been travelling down the Australian coastline. Defence Minister Richard Marles described the ship's activity as unusual.
There is no doubt that this is not unprecedented, but an unusual event.
The fleet is believed to be the furthest that Chinese ships have ventured down the coastline of Australia outside of an official visit. Joining me now for more on this is a senior fellow at the Menzies Research Centre, Nick Cater. Nick, is this something that should be concerning authorities?
Well, I think it should be concerning Richard Marles a bit more. He just says, well, it's unusual. To me, this is positively spooky, Rita. I mean, why on earth would the Chinese have any reason to waste a perfectly good warship sailing this far south unless they had hostile intentions on Australia? I don't know. Maybe they're on their way to take over Tasmania or something. I don't know. But I mean, the point is that they have legitimate security and strategic interests around China. But I think this kind of thing is provocative. I'd like to know if they notified the Australian government that they were going to do this, and I'd like to know what the Australian government's response has been, because from the sound of what Richard Marles is saying, it might be, yeah, this is a bit unusual, Beijing. No, we should be reading the riot act to them because, as we know, they have their eyes on the Pacific.
Well, I would hope that behind the scenes that they are much stronger in expressing their feelings about this. Perhaps they are being diplomatic in the media and not saying much, but I do fear, given the form of this government, that they're just as weak behind the scenes. Now, ASIO boss Mike Burgess has warned of foreign government hit lists and plots to steal defence secrets during his sixth and most sobering annual threat assessment. He gave this last night. He talked about countries such as Russia, Iran, ramping up sabotage operations against Australia. Here's part of what he had to say last night.
ASIO investigations have identified at least 3 different countries plotting to physically harm people in Australia. In a small number of cases, we held grave fears for the life of the person being targeted. Working with our international partners, we determined this plot was part of a broader effort by the regime to eliminate critics of the foreign government around the world: activists, journalists, ordinary citizens.
Nick, you also spoke about the threats facing the Australian Jewish community.
Anti-Semitism festered in Australia before the tragic events in the Middle East, but the drawn-out conflict gave it oxygen and some anti-Semites an excuse. Jewish Australians were also increasingly conflated with the State of Israel, leading to an increase in anti-Semitic incidents.
Nick, it's frightening to think that we've got countries like Iran planning to use violence to silence their critics who live in Australia.
It's extremely concerning, but also this use of, misinformation, which comes from places like Russia and probably Iran and China too. The rise of this anti-Jewish feeling has been sudden and dramatic. And although I don't think we yet have hard evidence of this, the New South Wales Police have at least canvassed the idea that this might be funded by foreign money. And I think if you look at this whole pro-Palestinian thing around the world, it's clear that somebody is putting serious money into this and filtering down various organisations. So this should be alarming. I mean, I think we tend to be a little bit relaxed and comfortable over this stuff in Australia, a little bit naive perhaps, thinking, we're good fellows. People come down here to pat our koalas and have their photo taken outside the Opera House. But no, in the minds of, malicious countries like North Korea, like Iran, like China, like Russia, they're perfectly prepared to go to whatever lengths it takes to meddle in our democracy, undermine our democracy and take direct action against people that they see as a threat.
And Nick, you spoke about the increase in anti-Semitism, and there seems to be real institutional power behind some of this sentiment, particularly when you look at what's happening on our university campuses, what some of these academics are saying. We're not just talking about a few people on the fringes who've got no power, no influence, people in prominent positions influencing young minds are spewing this poison.
Yeah, I mean, of course, they want to portray this as some kind of spontaneous community reaction, because it's nothing like that. I mean, we've been watching the left for 20 years or more to see their modus operandi, and whether it's climate change or transgender rights or whatever the cause, when you delve into it, there is serious money going into these causes that's deliberately fueling and funding people to work full-time on these campaigns. I've got no reason to believe it's any different at all with this anti-Jewish movement, the pro-Palestinian movement, which is disrupting our civil fabric. It is really putting at threat the whole idea of sort of multiculturalism, you know, which I wanted to work, but now I'm doubting it with this going on. But if we don't think that there's foreign actors or even people within Australia who deliberately provoke this, then we're just totally naive.
Now let's go to Victoria. Premier Jacinta Allen has announced a plan to cut down on the state's bureaucracy. It's going to be fairly severe cuts, Nick. Sources are claiming that more than 6,500 jobs could be axed from Victoria's 55,000 strong public service. This comes amid revelations that the state's wages bill has nearly doubled from when Labor first came to power. So we've gone from $18.8 billion to $37.5 billion. And that wages bill blew out by $3 billion in just 1 year. And it comes after a report by the state's financial watchdog showed that cost of major projects in Victoria had blown out by close to $11.7 billion. That's with a B, in just the past year. Nick, Victoria is in serious financial peril. There's no other way to describe the record debt.
Yeah, this 6,500 they're talking about, worst case scenario, that's just a drop in the ocean, Rita. You know, the public service in Victoria increased by 17% during COVID. And you'd expect after that, you know, people to go back to their normal day jobs. But no, it's kept growing since then. So this is a very small cut of a very large number of people that this government has put on to the payroll, and you bet your bottom dollar that they won't be cutting this in any logical fashion if they cut it at all. I mean, after all, the review is being led by a former senior Victoria public servant. So it's hardly Elon Musk, is it? You know, so I don't take this seriously, but there's certainly a need to cut. And you make the point about infrastructure, right? Their infrastructure products are blown out. Not only that, you know, you're not actually finishing anything in Victoria, are you? I mean, you don't want to come here and look at our railways and our tunnels. You'd have infrastructure envy here in New South Wales because we've just got the stuff down. They haven't done that in Victoria. So they're paying more, they've got a larger public service, and it's actually doing less. It's less effective. Something has to happen, doesn't it?
Oh, you would hope so. If you unleashed someone like an Elon Musk in Victoria, it would be remarkable the waste they would find. If you just give them a month, and I think things would sort out fairly quickly. But we don't have anybody like that. Before you go, talking about mad spending, it's been revealed that federal and state and local governments are spending madly. The expenditure is exceeding more than $1 trillion combined last year, even more than they were spending during COVID. And Nick, this exorbitant spending is certainly helping to keep inflation high and discouraging the RBA from lowering the cash rate further.
Yeah, I think people get this message now. People understand that inflation is driven by too much money circulating the economy, and if the government's pumping money in, then that's a big cause. So we get that sort of tiny rate drop from the RBA this week, which I'm sure is welcome but very small for mortgage owners. But there's two ways to fight inflation. One is to raise interest rates. The other is for the government to cut its own spending. Well, the government hasn't cut its own spending, so mortgage rates have risen even higher than they should have had to. So, because the government can't cure its own spending habit, ordinary people with mortgages have to take the brunt of that. It's totally unfair.